Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have AmiLynne Carroll. She is a certified holistic practitioner, holistic life coach, an author, speaker, and a seeker. Welcome to the show, AmiLynne.
Good morning, AJ. Great to be with you and with your listeners.
You are welcome to the show, Emiline. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people will benefit, will learn from your story, will learn about what we are going to talk about. We'll be talking about how one can master their life's narrative. So, Emiline, to understand from you, is it that easy to master one's narrative when we have no control over our lives? Suddenly, something difficult can strike, like it did in your case, stage 4 cancer, and
I,
then building up.
I wouldn't say it's easy, but I'd say it's pretty simple. I think we complicate things, and the idea of mastering something, anything, requires commitment. And I think so often when we talk about like our life's purpose is we go through the perfunctory steps, but not necessarily that deep dive to really find out what is it that makes us happy? What is it that's really our calling versus the ideas that have been shared with us by teachers and parents and loved ones and friends along the way. So I think that the very idea of mastering our life's narrative, we kind of hijack that because we aren't necessarily willing to dig in and do the work that's required of us in order to master anything, let alone our life's purpose.
Right, Emily. When we have a bit of fog while driving, it becomes difficult to drive. A little bit of snow, and we are worried. When you have a thing called cancer, that too at stage 4, it is very difficult for any person to see things. Forget about looking at the positive side of things. Help us understand then, with your understanding of things, how one should look at things. Even a small thing worries at in today's time. A big thing can blur everything around us, and we may just lose sight of everything else except for the problem that we have in hand. Help us through your own journey, a bit about yourself, Emily, and then to the present stage. You are certified holistic practitioner, holistic life coach. It's a lot of inspiration, a lot of learning for a lot of people.
Happy to share, and grateful for the question too, because for me, life started out, I think, as it does for so many of us, with the guidance of parents and teachers and what their understanding of life was. And for me, I took a really left turn shift back in 2007. I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, part of an experimental program that clearly was not helping. And my doctors did as they should in a compassionate way, brought me in and said, you really need to get your affairs in order because we don't think you're going to make it out of this one. And what I began to do with that information, well, first and foremost, let's be realistic. I went home and cried for a couple of days. It's pretty devastating news, especially, I was in my 30s, early 30s. I had a lot of life left to live. And yet, after a couple of days in tears and just feeling quite overwhelmed, I realized that diagnosis was their best opinion. Doctors are going to give you their best opinion. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only answer. And so I began to question everything that I'd ever believed, whether it was about God, whether it was about business, whether it was about who I am and what I want. And it was only through that questioning that I realized that I'd spent the first 30 years of my life making sure that everybody around me was happy, but failing to figure out what made me happy. And by me, I'm not talking about self-serving, being arrogant or narcissistic. I'm just talking about what's my calling? Why am I here? Because if we're so busy taking care of everybody's needs that we're not fulfilling the reason why we are here, then we're going to become overwhelmed. We're going to become exhausted. We're going to have that burnout. And in a moment of crisis, when someone tells you that there's an expiration date on your life, I would say that that kind of harbors on a moment of crisis. But in that moment of crisis, I chose to begin questioning instead of giving up. It was one person's opinion. And to this day, best of friends with that doctor and very grateful for that information all those years ago, because it really was the catalyst for me to find out what does make me happy? What what is my purpose? What's my calling here? And so I think that for each of us, when we begin to talk about mastering the narratives in our lives, is we have to understand whose narrative we're actually following. Is it our narrative? Is it what the universe or God has set forth for us? Or are we so busy following everybody else's need for happiness and whatever we can contribute to help them be happy, that we fail to listen to our own yearnings in a way that, in listening to those yearnings, we're actually helping those around us even more than what we've learned to do, which is just keep everybody around us happy, failing to take care of our own selves in the process.
Right, right, Emiline. I'm just trying to understand that moment, those times about your questions.
Mhm.
As per the doctors, their best opinion, it was a difficult time for you, and that it will be difficult for you in the coming days, months, whatever they were saying. In that situation, if you were talking about your own happiness, that was one question, knowing that the doctors could be right, but may not be right because that is only their best opinion. Generally, many of the people's questions in such situations is, God, why me? And then it all develops to so many other things, self-pity to anger to a lot of other things. What helped you frame your questions? What were the other questions that were in your mind apart from, about your happiness? Help us understand that mindset. I think that mindset is what sets one's narrative in life.
I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the most important things that I realized through this questioning phase is I was actually asking the wrong questions. I was, it became this space of really evaluating the question before I even opened up to an answer. And by that, it's like, well, why am I here? What's my purpose? And for me, I began to explore different spiritual practices, whether it was meditation or prayer, whether it was calling the circle, whether it was yoga or going for walks. That idea of taking my questions to this place that clearly has wisdom beyond what I had felt like I'd had access to before that. And those questions aren't about why. Of course, the why me was there, but I could only ask the same question over and over and over again without an answer before I began to realize I was again asking the wrong questions. And it's not who am I? The very most That first question, the most important question I learned to ask is, what am I? Because who automatically denotes something separate from the universe, separate from God, separate from that expression of creation. And so for all these years, I felt like I was operating from the best that I could, but the wrong set of questions. It's not who am I? It's what am I? And if I want to make it possessive, it's whose am I? And I get to be the expression of the universe, the very expression of God. Without me, without you, AJ, without your listeners, the universe is not fully expressed. It's not fully experienced, even in that regard. And so it's learning to take the standard questions and set them aside and almost ask yourself, okay, if I were God, if I were this ultimate creator of life, what would I see? If I was looking through that lens of perfection and creation, what would I see? And it's not that you don't see the challenge. It's not that you don't see the illness or the disease. It's that you really begin to see the good in absolutely every situation. Whether you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or atheist, we all believe in the concept of good. And wherever that originates is inconsequential to our conversation today, because it's the good that we're looking for that's present in every situation. And we don't look for the good in order to excuse or condone the challenge, but it helps us to find balance in those moments of crises. One of the things I realized through my questioning process is that so oftentimes we hear about people that have a crisis of faith or a midlife crisis. And what I began to realize is that it's not a crisis of faith. It's not a midlife crisis. It's a crisis of belief, because we haven't really truly lived our beliefs, because we don't know what we believe. We carry on the beliefs of our parents, of our teachers, of our coworkers around us. But when we get really quiet, we start asking that question, what am I? Why am I here? Not why is this or that happening to me, but what's my real purpose in being here? Then we begin to realize that every situation is just like a pancake. It's got two sides. And if we look for the good, it makes it easier to navigate those things in our lives that are challenging, whether it's a health diagnosis, whether it's the loss in a love relationship of someone that was really precious to us, or maybe it's a job that we've had for a number of years and thought we loved that just suddenly comes to an end. I think Mr. Rogers, for those of you who are familiar with Fred Rogers' Neighborhood, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, he said it best. Look for the helper, look for the good. You know, this tragic thing that's happened, it can be a lesson and it can be a blessing. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And what's going to determine that is our mindset. Yes, I had a doctor who said, I give you 6 weeks. And to have someone from a place of expertise affix to you an expiration date can be jarring. But what I chose to do is to see it as an invitation not for an expiration date of my death, but how am I, if that's true, then how am I going to live the rest of every moment that I have? And in the early stages, it was all about asking questions I hadn't asked before. And it's like being the innocence of a child. We're digging deep into the things that really matter, but sometimes we're doing it for the very first time. So in that space, I encourage those that are listening, you want to start digging deep into those questions, make sure you take a travel partner with you, because there's not anything in life that's not made better with a travel partner, especially if you're learning to ask questions about life that you've never asked before, because it can quickly become very overwhelming. And overwhelming, we automatically think of as bad or negative. Overwhelming sometimes just says you need somebody here to travel with you as you're asking those hard questions. Because if we never ask the hard questions, we're never going to find the answers that we so desperately seek towards that path of flow, the ebb and flow of life. It doesn't have to be a roller coaster. It gets to be an ebb and flow, but we get to choose. We get to choose.
Right, right, Emiline. So people say, you say that surrendering to the flow of life. And people say we have to fight for everything. These are two different ways. Amidst these things, how do people plan out something? When is the time to go with the flow, surrender to the flow? Is it pure surrender, or it is the path towards victory? When should one fight? What is this fight about? I want to understand for a lot of people. And also in your journey, when the doctor says 6 weeks, when did you start getting that certainty that you are moving beyond those 6 weeks? And then that is the time to set the right narrative for yourself for the rest of your life.
Two really great questions, AJ. And the first thing I would say is that it's only a fight because we make it a fight. A teacher of mine that I look up to, Adyashanti, says, I only suffer when I want things to be different. And when we think about that on practical terms, I only suffer when I've outlined what I want life to look like and it's not looking like that, so I'm disappointed. I only suffer when someone else is not acting the way I think they should be acting, given the circumstances that we're in. I only suffer when I want things to be different. So this idea of fight versus surrender to me is, it's a caricature of life. We choose to fight because we think that's what we're called to do. If it's going to be, it's up to me. If it's going to get done, it's up to me to get it done. Is, in my opinion, a detour from our actual calling here in life. And our calling here in life, Ram Dass says, is simply to walk each other home. And that walking each other home means meeting people where they're at. And that means me too. That means looking in the mirror and affording myself the same grace and the same humility and the same compassion in a moment of challenge as I would a loved one or a best friend or even a stranger on the street. That whole idea of coming back to the golden rule, do unto others as I would have them do unto you or unto me. And the reality of it is that because we're so disconnected from the true identity of who we are, is that golden rule actually comes true quite often. We actually do expect people to treat us poorly because that's what we think we deserve. Even though we may say differently, down deep inside, because we've not done that work of figuring out what our calling is, why we're here, what makes us feel fulfilled and happy. And so everything becomes a battle because we are gauging our life up against the ideal life of someone else. So it's only a battle because we want things to be different. What if I wake up this morning and I simply say to whatever higher being I ascribe to, okay, I am an instrument of your work today. What lessons am I going to learn and what blessings am I going to receive? And when we're opening up to our day in that way, actually takes the pressure off because we're not orchestrating anything. And I don't care what your faith background is, even if you don't believe in a higher power, there's still this idea of universe, of energy. Science is now proving that the world is greater than just our singular being. And that singular being is a fuller expression when we recognize that I am not my sister's keeper. I am my sister. And so this idea of fighting is we're fighting an ideal. So we're never going to win. And the idea of surrendering is not giving up. The idea of surrender is opening to what really is truly happening in front of me. What is it that I can see? What is it that I can carry forward? What is it that I can learn from? And what is it that's happening for me right here, right now, that is a huge blessing, but that I'm missing because I'm upset that things aren't the way that I wanted them to be, or I thought that they would be, even though that's never been promised or guaranteed to us. Even when things go the way we'd like, they're rarely the way we'd planned, if we're really honest about it. So this idea of fighting, I would almost encourage you, if you're listening, lay down the gauntlet. Just set it down. There's no need for it. We don't have to fight in order to find that sense of peace, to find that positive narrative in our life. Matter of fact, I would suggest that by not fighting, we're quicker to hear that still small voice inside that's there to guide us in a moment of crisis or a moment of celebration.
Right, right, Emiline. A lot of people talk, there is so much of talk about purpose in life. And there are people who call themselves seeker. One of them is you. Is purpose and seeking the same thing? How do you see these two things? How should people look at those two things? Purpose seems to be somewhere around the destination. Seeking is something much more bigger, larger. That's my way of looking at it, but I want to understand your way of looking at it.
Well, I think we actually look at it very similar. What I'm going to say, though, is I think it's really important that we build bridges, that we each individually build a bridge from where we're at to where it's possible for us to understand or achieve today, which is very different than where we're going to be able to achieve or understand a week or a year or a decade from now. There's so often this belief that we have to go from asleep to awake, from a lack of awareness to fully aware, to subconscious to consciously living. And I think so many of us get caught up in the space of it feels too big, and so I'm not even going to try. So this idea of surrendering is not about giving up again. It's about simply taking a step back and building the bridge that I need to build right now. And a practical way of building that bridge is reach out to someone who you respect the way they make decisions in life. It may not even be decisions about the thing that you're dealing with, but you appreciate the way they go about, tackling a challenge or facing a question in their life. Find an author that you have resonated with in the past. And in today's day and age, if you're not a reader, go online, YouTube, different websites. Find what feeds your soul, what resonates with you. And it may feel uncomfortable at first too, because different sometimes can feel uncomfortable because it's not something we're aware of, we're not used to. Different doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it different. So when you're looking to find those practical things in life that can help you find your narrative, that will allow you to set down the gauntlet, there doesn't need to be a fight. It's simply about finding that one person in your life that you can literally say anything to without judgment. And you get to be that for them as well. And it's a practice. It's not something that we immediately know how to do. So we build bridges to what our understanding is of life. And the other thing I'll say to that, AJ, is I think that so often, especially here in the Western society, is we are raised with ideals. We are raised with a certain level of ethic and morals and beliefs that our parents lovingly share with us. But to follow those blindly would be as wrong as it would be to follow God blindly. God asks us to question. Every faith acknowledges that. It's not that we question that's wrong, it's how we question. So to open ourselves up to that space requires us to do nothing but to lay the fight down. Because what already is just here waiting for us to come back into our own.
Right, right, Emiline. When people talk of, their narrative, many a times people think about their legacy, that this is how people should remember me, whether you have understood. So, is narrative, mastering one's narrative, is about setting your legacy, or it's about seeking and finding yourself? How should people look at it?
Well, luckily in 2024, people get to look at it however they want. The most important thing is that they ask the question for themselves and not for the person sitting next to them or the teacher that they admire or the parent that they respect, but to answer that question for themselves. Because for me, I didn't find peace. I couldn't even find comfort in this world until I knew that I was asking questions for me. And look, I'm still asking some of the same questions I was asking back there in June of 2007. Don't always have the answer, but at least I know I'm on the journey. And I'm always the first one to say, okay, Emiline, are you asking the right questions? Especially if the answer seems to be hard to come. Or it's always important too to ask ourselves the question, when we're talking about purpose and narrative, is it our purpose and our narrative? Or is it that of a higher power? Am I here to be a witness to something? Or am I here to be what is witnessed? And I think so often we think it's one or the other. And it's not, it's both. Because without being the witness, without seeing what is, without expressing and experiencing that, without seeing it, then it goes unfully expressed and experienced. And without expressing it, it goes without being fully expressed.
Right,
So it's
right,
both,
Emily.
in my
Right,
opinion, And that might not be true for everyone. I just encourage you to open to questions.
absolutely, absolutely. You call yourself a steadfast seeker yourself. So, what is it that you seek for yourself, uh, Emily?
Wow, what a great question. And actually, it's the first time anybody's ever really asked me that question in that way. And I love it because it makes me think about it differently. For me, I think seeking used to be for answers. And now I think seeking has taken on a whole new experience for me, because seeking is not about asking questions and finding answers. Seeking is about expansion. When we seek, there's a yearning. When we seek, there's a desire, there's a drive. When we seek, there's an understanding that there's something greater than just me. And so for me, seeking is not the same bridge as it was when I started this journey of asking questions and finding answers. But now it's really evolved into this space of experience. What do I get to experience? And being open, no matter what opportunity is in front of me, being open to the fullness of that experience, because that to me is seeking. That's the expansion of what good is, of what love is, and what life is. Being open to seeing both the lesson and the blessing in every situation.
And what about peace? Have you built, how far has your bridge to peace been built, or it's been built enough to, actually embrace peace?
Oh, I think that all the planks for that bridge are present, but I don't know that I have them all in the right order on any given day. I think that we get moments of peace, and I think that there's a sense of striving for that. And again, when I put down the striving, when I put down the need, when I put down the seeking, and I just am present, that's when peace is present. And that peace is just a peace. That peace, P-E-A-C-E, is just a peace, P-I-E-C-E, of life, greater life. And to think that I need to be at peace all the time is to misunderstand evolution. Because I'm usually not at peace when life is asking me to stretch beyond my comfort zone. And yet, if I can recognize that that request to stretch beyond my comfort zone is actually for my own good, that even in the discomfort of being outside my comfort zone, I can find peace because I know that's part of my path. And so when you wake up as a quadriplegic and life doesn't look anything like you ever imagined it to, you get to decide whether to be the victim and to receive the pity that is justified in some regard. Or do we wake up and do we decide that this is the most amazing life that God has given me today? And how do I get to utilize this life in new and practical ways so that those around me get to witness the good that I get to be the conduit for?
Wonderful, wonderful. There is much to learn about life, about mastering one's narrative. So, a lot of people who would want to know more about you, learn more from you, get your help as a holistic life coach. What is the best way for them to connect with you, Emiline?
Well, the easiest way is one of two. You can go to my website, which is my name spelled out, AmiLynneCarroll.com. You can see there on the bottom of the screen there, the proper spelling of my name. Thank you for doing that. Feel free to visit me on my website. And also, I share quite frequently on social media, both Instagram and Facebook. Just Google my name. It'll come up for you. I'd love to connect with you, and I'd love to sit with you and hold that space so that you can be reintroduced to you after years of searching and seeking. That's what we get to do, is to walk each other home.
Walk each other home. Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Blessings.